I'm Tahnee Perry, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I'm excited to introduce you all to Tahnee Perry, the unofficial AI expert of the travel industry. Tahnee and I first met when she was leading marketing for Deem, a leading business travel software company. And she's also worked for other travel industry powerhouses, including North Star Travel Group and Focusrite. Now, as the founder of A25, she educates her clients on how to use AI to gain a competitive edge, boost productivity, enrich content, and future-proof their strategies. Even more excitingly, she's going to share all of those details with us today. Tahnee, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you again. And just tell us a bit of how you first got started in the travel industry.
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. I was listening to one of your podcasts recently with Will, who's in the hotel industry, and it made me think of my early days when I first moved to the States, because you can probably tell from the accent, not originally from here. But I moved to Colorado and I was interviewing for jobs, and one of them was at a hotel. And I sat down with the food and beverage manager, I think, and they said, it's really long hours. You have to work nights and weekends. You get a half-hour break for lunch. And I thought, that sounds terrible. I don't know if I'm really cut out for that kind of work. And so I went the other direction, and I ended up in a role more focused on sales and marketing, which was actually fortuitous in a way because it led me down the path that I'm on today, where I like to focus more on roles that have a technology component as a part of them.
And tell us where you're from originally and how old you were or when you moved to Colorado, if that was your first entry to the US.
Yeah, so it's been a really long time. I moved, I think it was like 24 years ago from Australia. I had just graduated from college or university, as we call it over there. And this was really my first, when I first came to the States, it was my first career move. And so very, very early on entry-level positions. But I had only intended on staying here for a year or two before moving back. And then I fell in love with the whole country, the industry. And then I worked a series of jobs in the travel industry that allowed me to travel, to learn, to develop my skills. And I still haven't been back.
That's wild. I guess sometimes we find our home, even if it's not where we're from originally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've settled in in California now. And I have to admit, I love the weather out here. It's always very temperate and there's a lot of outdoor activity space. And so I think I've found my place.
And so from the sales and marketing roles that you held in the travel industry, now you've really transitioned into AI, and you do really kind of focus within the travel industry. But tell us, how did that transition take place?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting transition. Like I said, I've been attracted to roles that had a technology component. So I was the director of marketing and technology for a Colorado destination marketing organization. I then ended up working for Focusrite, which was focused on travel distribution and had a very heavy focus on technology. And then the most recent role, I worked for a travel technology startup in the San Francisco Bay Area. And when ChatGPT came out in 2022, I immediately saw the opportunity for that innovation. And I said to my team at the time, we really need to lean into this and experiment and try it out for our day-to-day work. And while we were having some early success, what became really apparent to me was just how little knowledge there was around AI and how it works. And then all of a sudden I had all these people coming to me and asking questions and asking if I could advise them on how to help and how to implement it at their company. And that was really the genesis for developing my own consultancy, A25, so that I had a platform to go out there and help companies and teams integrate AI into their day-to-day.
AI is something that I feel like everyone is talking about, but few people understand. It reminds me of when social media first started for brands, and we'd have the kind of social media team just chucking out buzzwords, and you'd have very senior level C-suite executives nodding along, just thinking that this person knew what they were talking about because they had a ton of buzzwords. So help us zoom out, I guess, and explain a bit about like, what is AI? What is artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's a really big concept, and it has been around for a really long time. Alan Turing is considered the grandfather of artificial intelligence. He created what's called the Turing test. And that test is a measure of whether or not a machine can mimic human intelligence. And so if you've spoken on the phone with an AI avatar or used a chatbot, a lot of the hospitality brands are now using these chatbots, and you feel like it's a human, that's the Turing test in practice right there. But I think where the confusion comes is that artificial intelligence is really an umbrella term for all the different types of AI that are out there. You have things like machine learning, deep learning. But what's gotten everybody excited, what developed all the hype, is something called generative AI. And this is a subset of AI where the technology has the ability to create what's called new or novel content. But you would be more familiar with this when you're using a large language model like ChatGPT or Google's Gemini. And why everyone's so excited about this is because generative AI, because it can create new and novel content, it just has a lot more applications. And I think for the hospitality industry, that's really exciting because this is where things like chatbots and sentiment analysis and creating content come from. It's all around Gen AI.
It's interesting to hear from you how long AI has actually been around, because I think to many of us, it feels like a new novel concept. And one of the things that I've been really most surprised of is the high adoption rate, or at least what seems like a high adoption rate to me, in regular people like myself interfacing with AI. I talk to ChatGPT daily, usually multiple times a day. I have seen the rise of people having AI note takers on calls, and I can really see the value of that. And sometimes the notes that they take are probably better than if you had a human there to synthesize that information. So what do you see as the tools that are having the highest adoption rate now? And what are the tools that people should be using if they aren't already?
It's probably the most common question that I get when I speak about artificial intelligence. And I think the reason is that because AI is making it easier to develop these tools, there's been an explosion of them. I focus mostly on the marketing side, but there's a report that comes out every year, and they show that there's been a 28% increase in marketing AI tools alone. That's like 3,000 platforms just this year that are available to use. But my answer is always the same, and it's you should use what you have access to already. And if your organization is, usually you're either a Google Workspace or a Microsoft Copilot workplace, and both of those companies have launched AI features within their work suite. So I think it makes sense for you to start there because you have access to it and it's already been vetted by your company. It's already integrated into all of your other platforms and tools. And then if you find that there's something you want to that you want to do or achieve that's not a part of your work suite, that's when you would go out and look for that extra tool. For me personally, there's a couple that I really love. I use Grammarly every day. Grammarly is a writing helper or assistant. It checks me for grammar, word use, style. And then if I get stuck, I can click the little button. I can say, help me finesse this. I need it to sound more professional, or this is just too long. Can you help me summarize? And it's built into your writing applications. So that makes it really easy. You don't have to toggle back and forth. And then the other application I use is something called Reclaim, and it kind of auto-magically manages my calendar for me. So I upload all of my to-dos, all of my meetings, and then it uses blocks within my calendar to tell me when I should tackle things based on their due date. And then if I don't get something done, it will reformulate my calendar for me until it gets to the point where the deadline is due, and it will say, hey, you need to do this today or you're going to be late. So I like that.
so
It really
cool.
keeps me on task.
Yeah, that's a really cool tool. I didn't know that existed. And I think that's probably a little bit of the question mark with the world of AI is like people don't know what exists, or even if, let's just say, your basic knowledge is ChatGPT, like myself, you almost don't know how to use it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you're trying to do your day job. So it's not like you have time to go out there and experiment and figure out which tool is the right one for you. I guess I should say, like, you could follow me on LinkedIn because I spend my days experimenting and testing a lot of these tools. And when I find one I really like, I'll post about it and I'll say why, and then give you a little how-to guide of how to get started. And really, I think the best way to learn about these things is to find people who are in your space, who are leaning into AI, and listen to what they're saying and look at what they're using, because they're probably going to have something specific to your role that you may like to try for yourself.
And speaking of our space, let's talk a little bit about hospitality specifically. What advancements in AI are you seeing in our world? And what are the tools or the opportunities that this technology presents to our industry?
It's really interesting. So I've been doing this for a couple of years now. But last year, when I started presenting at a lot of events, people used to say to me, "Oh, can you bring some examples of people who are actually doing this, so it isn't so theoretical?" And I'd struggle to find examples of hospitality companies that had any real life, use cases. And then 12 months later, there's just so many, it's hard to choose. And so there are a couple that I think are really interesting specifically for hospitality. The first one, there's a company out there called Passado, and I like it because, I'm a marketer by trade. And what they do is they help you, if you're in a marketing or sales role in hospitality, you can use their platform for personalization and translation. So let's say you're a global hotel brand and you need to execute a campaign or advertising. You can use that platform. You can input all of your segments, your different languages, and then Passado it'll test and measure dynamically. So it'll launch the campaign. If things aren't working, it will adapt it for you automatically. And I think that's amazing because I can find sometimes campaign management I find really tedious, and trying to test out different verbiage and different graphics and knowing whether or not you've got the translation correct. And if what you're saying in another language resonates can be really time consuming. And so I think I like how Passado is tackling that and solving it in a way that feels really easy. The second area I think a lot of people focused on and probably have seen more examples of this are chatbots. If you work at a hospitality brand, a hotel, an activities provider, literally anyone, you need to have I'd call it an LLM-driven chatbot today. I can't tell you how many websites I go to because I do a lot of experimentation and testing, and they're still using those chatbots that have the preloaded, here are the things you can ask me, and then you click the button and it says, and here's the canned answer. There's no reason to have that anymore on your website or as part of any interaction you would have with a prospect or customer. There are so many tools that plug into, say, the OpenAI API that help your customers and prospects have a natural conversation with your content. There's a couple that are built specifically for hospitality that I think are interesting. One is HiGiffy and the other is Medallia. There's actually tons. I think when I looked, there was 25 that are available, but those two I think are the best.
Calling all short-term rental hosts and real estate investors ready to turn your listing into a money-making machine? Join me at the 3rd annual Level Up Your Listing Summit, happening March 9th through 11th in Phoenix, Arizona. It's the event where female hosts come together to learn, share, and level up their game. Use code SweetSuccess, that's SUITESUCCESS, to get 10% off your ticket at levelupyourlistingsummit.com. Tickets are sure to sell out, so act fast. Hope to see you there. And earlier you said NLM, right? Natural language model?
A large language model, otherwise known as LLM.
LLM, okay.
And then a component of that is NLP, natural language processing. So those two terms go together. And basically it just means that these models, these types of AI are really good with language. And that's why they're well suited for a chatbot, because it's basically you're chatting with this technology and you're using natural language. You're not typing in like a code or I don't know, some like preset language for them to decipher.
Something I heard from a former CTO was that the risk with this type of technology is when it doesn't know the answer, it makes it up. Is that true?
Yes, definitely. It's something to be aware of. There have been some advancements with that issue. And the way you solve it is you create a walled garden for your chatbot and you feed it an exact knowledge base. And then you tune the model very specifically to say, if you do not know the answer and the answer is not within your knowledge base that we've built for you, say you don't know. And I've spoken to a couple of different people who've built chatbots. There was actually a woman I was speaking to. She's part of the Queensland Tourism Board, and they built a chatbot to help with. What they do is they distribute grants to hospitality companies in Australia they're trying to do different things, and so there's a whole process around applying for these grants, and they get a lot of questions. And they thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a chatbot for that instead of it taking up human resources? And they said they had to spend quite a bit of time creating the parameters that a chatbot could apply. And it was just a little bit of test and learn. And they got to the point where their hallucinations are down to less than 1%.
And hallucination is the technical term for when AI makes up answers, right?
Yes, exactly.
Just fun. Speaking of everything that you're talking about, I do think there is a lot of fear mongering that happens around AI. There's the whole kind of robots are coming to take our jobs and, we're never going to talk to humans again. Is that how you see the future of AI?
No, I don't think AI is here to take our jobs. I would say that if you work in a position where it's very repetitive, manual kind of tasks, you should be worried because there will be AIs that can do that. I would say as humans, we need to lean into the tasks or responsibilities that require something other than a very mechanical, logical step-by-step process. So if you're a customer service rep, I'd say you should probably start looking at different roles, something with more creativity or strategy or empathy. But in general, people in hospitality, I think there's always going to be a need for humans in this space because humans crave a human connection, and that's not going away.
And when you talked about putting parameters so that your AI tool knows to say, I don't know, is that something that somebody like myself who's using free versions of ChatGPT, can I train ChatGPT to do that? Or is that really to the makers to be doing that?
Yes, you can do that. And I think with the free tools, you are somewhat limited. I always recommend if you do like ChatGPT and that's your favorite LLM, you should upgrade to the pro version, which is $20 a month. And once you have that pro version, there's a couple of things that you get. One, you can toggle off its training. So any of the things that you input, they stay within your instance. They don't go back into the training data, which I think is important. It's just an extra, control on your privacy. And the second thing you can do is you can create what they call custom GPTs. And you can build them, just like I was talking about with the chatbot, you can load your own instructions. And you can say to your custom GPT, do not make things up. If you don't know the answer, just tell me. And you give it very clear instructions to operate under when you're asking for outputs. So to give you a real life example, I was recently working on a piece of content and I'd interviewed a whole set of people and I'd gotten the transcripts from my AI transcriber. I loaded them into ChatGPT and I said, hey, can you give me the quotes from the calls? And it came back with all these beautiful quotes that sounded so eloquent. And I looked at them and I was like, I don't remember the person saying that. And I realized ChatGPT was making these quotes up. It was looking at the overall theme of the call And it decided that it was going to write better quotes for me. So I went back and I said, look, you need to give me quotes in verbatim. They need to be word for word. Do not make them up. Do not paraphrase. Do not enhance. And once I gave it that instruction, then I got a set of quotes that were exactly word for word.
I've had this exact same situation where I'm like, here's a big piece of content, synthesize it for me, or here's a transcript from a podcast, pull out some key quotes. And the key quotes it pulled out were great, but nobody said it. So I've seen that firsthand. And something you just touched on is a cause for concern of mine, but also something almost so scary that I don't give it a lot of headspace because it's too intimidating to me, but it's privacy and safety, security. So for someone like myself who's just using the free version, it sounds like everything that I'm inputting is going to this larger model, which yes, is making it smarter, but it's sharing all of this, confidential information. And no, I'm not using it for work purposes, just for personal ones, but it's sharing all of that someplace, right?
Well, yes and no, but it goes into a black box. You don't really know where it's going to end up or where it will come out. But what I will say is that even if you have the pro version, never upload any sensitive information. Don't give it your address. Don't give it your phone number or any of your banking information. But then also keep in mind that any of the other questions that you ask it, any documents that you load up, it stores those forever. There's actually a really fun little exercise happening right now where people are asking ChatGPT to create an image based on what you know about my life. And what's really scary about this is the images that it's creating are so accurate.
Wow.
And it will create an image of you, what it thinks you look like. And I'd say 90% of the time it gets your gender, it gets your appearance, it gets your interests. And this is just from the conversations that you're having with it. And so, yeah, they say, ChatGPT doesn't have memory and it doesn't actually store this in what they call active memory, but it stays somewhere because how else would it know all these things about you?
That is terrifying, but also why it's so powerful. And actually my free ChatGPT lately has been saying memory full. And I've been kind of thinking, this is a disservice to me in a way, because I often am like, I'm doing this, which I've been working on for weeks, and I almost want it to have the memory, almost like Instagram in a way. We're all mad that Instagram is listening to us, but then it serves us up an ad for something that we didn't even know existed, and we're instantly buying it because Apple Pay makes it that easy. And we're like, you know what? Maybe it is a good thing that they listen to me sometimes. So how do you see that balance? Like, does that make you, obviously not, but want to stop using AI tools, or do we just not think about it? Or are there protective measures we can put in place?
I've always felt like as long as the benefit to me outweighs what I'm putting into the model, I'm comfortable with it. And again, I'm not putting in anything that could put me at risk, say financially or personally. Those things just don't belong in an LLM.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to load up my work samples and my writing style and my photos. Like I load up photos of myself because all of that content and information already exists out there on the web, even on the dark web in some cases. And fingers crossed, touch on wood. So far, I have been safe. I haven't had any, risk of fraud or someone trying to steal my identity. I know it's definitely a risk today, and more so now, given there's a lot of technologies that allow people to do deep fakes. But I'm still, for me, the benefit of working with these technologies far outweighs the risks in my mind. And no, not everybody feels that way. There are a lot of folks out there, especially AI leaders, who are very, very concerned about what's happening with some of these technologies. But I feel like if you're too afraid to use them and you decide that you're going to be hands off with all of these technologies, you're going to find yourself at a point where you'll be left behind. And I think of it, I think it was the 50s or the 60s, they introduced calculators. And teachers in schools everywhere were like, no, we can't use calculators. This is cheating. It's going to destroy the students' minds. And look at us today. Calculator is I can't do math without a calculator. So I feel like AI is that next thing, and we have to figure out how to use it. And yes, there are going to be sacrifices to do that. And I think a little bit of your privacy is part of that.
Well, you can do math without a calculator. You can do math as long as you have your AI assistant with you.
Exactly. And it's true. I actually use my ChatGPT to figure out things like percentages now instead of pulling up the calculator.
And what about like intellectual property? Because I agree with you. I'm not going to be dropping in my bank account numbers or my, passport details or anything. But I, much like you, from a writing perspective, will work with ChatGPT, particularly as a brainstorm buddy, because writing can be a really solitary, lonely pursuit. And having someone that is, quote, as invested in the project as I am is something I can't find in a human, but I can find in AI. So do you ever worry about, our ideas being stolen or our stories being told by someone else because we've input this information into this model?
Definitely. I think one of the big debates right now around content marketers is the proliferation of content. And ChatGPT, these large language models have made it so easy to write a blog or a white paper. And you find there are people out there who put in a prompt, they get their output, and they cut and paste it into the web. My feeling is that if you're doing that, the content that you're distributing is not worth reading. And I think humans are really good at seeing that.
Yeah.
When you read a sentence written 100% by ChatGPT, you know it. And then you're like, I don't want to read this anymore because it's just not, it's not engaging. And so the way I work with AI is like you, as a brainstorming partner, as a kind of a check and balance. So I'll write something and I'll load it up and I'll say, hey, what am I missing? Is this going to resonate with my target audience? Are there other points of view I might have missed? And then I go back based on its recommendations. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but I make tweaks based on what it tells me. But I never, ever cut and paste directly out of an AI because it's just not, there's no reason why anyone would ever want to read that. Now, that said, your original question was, are our ideas becoming disseminated? I think yes. And so I think that the key will be, as humans, we have our own personal stories, our own experiences, our own history. Those are things that you can always talk from that other people will find engaging. And so as a marketer, for example, you always have to bring a bit of that to your work.
You talk about using AI to enrich content. And, what we were just talking about there, if you copy and paste from AI, you're not going to get that. And I don't think that's what you mean. So how can we use AI to do that?
For me, my work process is I'm very engaged with the travel and the AI communities. And when you're in that, people have conversations about things they find interesting, topics that are challenging them. And because I'm a part of those conversations, usually I will get some kind of inspiration. I'll be like, oh, that's a really interesting topic. I like that. And I will make some notes and I will pop that into ChatGPT and I'll say, hey, can you help me think this through? What are all the elements? What are the pros and cons? What are the challenges? What are some other people saying about this topic? And then, it spits out all the outputs. And I'm like, great. Now I feel like I have a bigger picture, more points of view. And from that, I sit down and I say, okay, here's what I want to say. And I'll create a little outline and I'll pop that back into ChatGPT and I'll say, what do you think? Is this good? Is it engaging? And then once I'm satisfied with that outline, I write it. One thing I use ChatGPT a lot for is my titles and my hooks. I don't know what it is, but I just find it so hard to write that intro sentence. So I'll say to ChatGPT, give me 10 titles. And very rarely do I cut and paste the title, but usually it'll give me one where I'll think, oh, I actually like that structure or I like that word choice.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of bounce off of its suggestions.
Yeah.
So for me, I'd say it's more of a thought partner than a create this content for me.
That's exactly how I see it. And that's what I miss a lot from my time at working at Starwood Hotels and Resorts. We had such a strong and large global PR team, and we would sit in conference rooms together and brainstorm ideas. And it takes a really comfortable team to feel good about putting out bad ideas and not worrying they're going to get shut down in order to get to the good ideas. Because I think you need to say, well, what about this, but it's not this? And then someone goes, oh, well, but what if we take that and do it this way? And then you say, oh, well, what if we do it this way? And that's where ChatGPT has been so helpful to me, because exactly like you said, I'll put something in and say, how can I make this funny? And what it gives me is like definitively not funny. But the way that it set it up or phrased it makes me think of something else. And then I can make it that much better from there.
Yeah, exactly. I think for people who don't have teams like that, especially given a lot of us are working remotely, or there's a lot of solopreneurs out there now, ChatGPT is, I guess, a surrogate team in a way. It's not perfect. I think if you can find other humans to collaborate with, that's always ideal. But if not, then ChatGPT it's a really good friend.
And to that term, how can we use it to boost productivity?
I think there's so many use cases, and it just depends on what you do for work. Me personally, I use it for everything from this email I'm writing doesn't sound right. Can you help me? And again, I never cut and paste, because someone will always know if you've just cut and pasted an email, but it can help me rephrase it. If I am doing research, one of my favorite tools is a platform called Perplexity. And this is it's another version of a search tool that it's a lot more multimedia, and it gives you sources, but it's like ChatGPT in that it gives you the answer. So if I'm doing research for an article, or I'm looking at a platform that's new, I use these tools to do my research and to find out more. Here's a funny example. So we had Thanksgiving a couple of weeks ago, and as a foreigner, I've always found Thanksgiving a little bit stressful if I'm cooking for people coming over, because you've got so many different things you have to think about. So I actually used ChatGPT to plan out my entire day, and it created a schedule for me of what I needed to do the day before, what I needed to do the day on. It built me a shopping list, and then it gave me a complete step-by-step guide of all the different things I had to do in order to get all the dishes done and ready to put on the table. It accounted for dietary restrictions and taste. And if I didn't have a certain item in my pantry, I was like, well, what can I substitute? So I use it from everything from work tasks to my own personal life.
That's such a great example. And I think a lot of people, maybe not for those who are listening, because I think hopefully most people listening are very open-minded and always looking for new tools that are going to make them better, stronger, faster. But that's such a great example for people who are like, what do I have to use AI for? It really proves that it could be for anyone, and it can just really help you in the day-to-day life as much as it can also help you at work.
Yeah, most definitely. I think, if you're in the sales team at a hospitality company, you could download all of the transcriptions from your last 10 calls and ask ChatGPT to help you analyze any patterns, figure out what's working, what's not, give you some coaching. If you're in marketing, all your content ideas, you can have it help you figure out what you could improve. I'm trying to think, like if you're front desk, there's probably things that you can ask it about how to interact with people who are coming in to check in for their stay. There's just like endless. Any question you have, you can pop it into ChatGPT and ask, and it'll give you a really good answer.
I even heard you could take like a job description, pop it in and say, what are the 10 most likely questions I'm going to be asked in this job interview? Just things like that are so easy and obvious, but so helpful. And especially if it could be tailored to that specific job description, it really shows the limitlessness of this technology.
Yeah. I was actually at an event recently where someone was like, yeah, I filled in my performance review in 5 minutes this year because I had ChatGPT help me.
You're like, don't say that out loud.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
You talked about earlier, for example, people who work in customer service or are doing these like really routine tasks, that those types of roles might be more at risk of AI coming in and taking over. And actually, another guest that was on the podcast from the Future Laboratory, he was talking about if we think back to typing pools, and women were able to join the workforce as long as they were able to type however many words a minute. And then all of a sudden, the proliferation of the computer meant that away went the typing pools. And people worried, oh, there goes, workplace equity for women, though obviously we're still far away from equity. And look at what that actually did. It actually opened up way more career opportunities for us and hopefully more to come as we continue. So similarly, I'm not asking, oh, these jobs are going to go away and AI is going to take it away. But something you talked about is how we future-proof strategies. So whether it be our own career or the work that we're doing, how do you think about that? Like, how do we use AI to empower what we're doing and be really mindful of the things that actually it can do better than us?
It's a great question. And I think one that's important for companies, team leaders, and individual contributors all need to figure out for themselves. There's some really interesting research from a company called Section. They surveyed, I think it was 5,000 professional workers in the US and the UK. And what they found is that there are distinctive subsets of people and how they use AI. So at one end, they have what they call AI super users, and then at the other, there are skeptics. And what they found is that if you're an AI super user, you are much more predisposed to be open-minded, growth mindset. You're willing to experiment. You use AI every day. You think of it as a strategic thought partner. And then they've shown that this subset of people, they save hours a week, up to 12 hours. They're more efficient. They're more productive. They have higher job satisfaction because what they've done is figured out, I don't like doing any of these things. I'm going to have AI do it for me. And so they're happier. And then what they've also found is that those are the people that get tapped for career opportunities because managers see them being more strategic, more creative, and just getting more done. Then on the other end, we have the skeptics. These are the people that are really afraid of AI and they don't trust it, they don't like it. And so what they have this mindset, I tried it once and I didn't like the output and I can do it better. I can't tell you, it's not as prevalent now, but 6 months ago, I was talking to a set of content copywriters and they were like, I don't use ChatGPT at all because it's rubbish. And I was like, it made me cringe because I was like, okay, but you're not using it to write for you, but there are all these other examples of things it could help you with. And they were just like, carte blanche, don't want to use it because I hate it. Those are the kinds of people that they're showing in these survey results that are not going to progress. They're not going to get any promotions. They're going to find it really hard. If they are in customer service, for example, and they're eliminated because of AI, it's going to be really tough for them to find a new role. So my recommendation to everybody out there is lean in. Get your hands on the keyboard, pick a tool you like and use it every day and think about more ways to apply it to your job so that when the time comes and somebody says to you well, what are you using AI for? And how could we use it to do our jobs better? You have an answer.
What do you think some of the misconceptions about AI are?
I don't know that maybe I'm too close to the topic. I eat, breathe, and sleep AI. So I'm really deeply embedded in it. I think you talked a little bit about the fear around AI taking our jobs. I think that's a bit of a misconception. I also think that people have a tendency to overestimate the short-term impact, but underestimate the long-term impact. So if you were using AI today and you're underwhelmed with what it's giving you, then my advice is always don't give up because you just haven't found the right type of way to use it or you haven't found the right tool. And if you give up now, I feel like you might be just inches away from finding that perfect thing for you. And so you've just got to keep trying and experimenting. And so I'd say don't fear for your life. Everything is going to be okay. There's going to be a role for you out there in the hospitality industry. And don't give up are my 2 pieces of advice there.
I've seen that firsthand. When I first started using ChatGPT, I was like, this is dumb. I don't need this. This is silly. It's not everything it's giving me. It doesn't make sense. And then working with it more and more over time and figuring out the ways that it works for me and fits into my life and makes me faster and more efficient has been really exciting because now I feel almost supercharged in a way. So for people who maybe are still skeptical or are reformed skeptics like myself, do you think ChatGPT is that easiest tool for them to start with? Or I know you mentioned a few others that are maybe more marketing or hospitality specific, but what's the gateway AI drug, if you will?
I think ChatGPT, if you want an all-rounder, it's what I recommend. Especially if you don't already have the Google or Microsoft AI built into your work suite, I always recommend ChatGPT. And that's if you're in roles like marketing, sales, even customer service. If you're a designer, I think there's a different set of tools for you. I think Canva has some really interesting AI features. I love Midjourney, but I think most designers are frustrated with Midjourney because you don't have as much control over it. And then Adobe Suite is also, they have some really interesting AI functionality. And then if you're involved in video, I would say you should definitely sign up for Runway and also OpenAI's Sora, Sora, that they just released this week or last week. Those are two other tools that you should look at.
And when you look ahead, do you have any predictions for the future of AI and maybe even specifically the future of AI within hospitality?
For hospitality specifically, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of AI around voice. The voices, AI generated voices have become really good. It's almost impossible to distinguish them from human voices. And I can see lots of different applications from customer service to reservation reps. We'll get to the point where if you're making a phone call to say, get housekeeping or you want water sent to your room, you won't talk to a human. You'll talk to the AI agent that will then, who knows, maybe there'll be a little robot like Hilton has that comes up to your room with your water. But I think voice is going to become very popular this year.
Very cool. Okay, I want to ask you the last 3 questions that I ask every guest. And so these do not have to be AI-centric answers, but maybe they will be. Who knows? First is, what was the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
It was a while ago, so not AI related, but I visited Barcelona with my sister and we showed up and we were staying at it was a boutique hotel, and we came to check in and we asked the front desk person what we should do. And he whipped out this map of Barcelona, like this giant thing. And he basically created a three-day itinerary for us.
Wow.
Everything from sites to see, places to go for lunch, dinner, museums to check into. And then he also told us, like, go here at this time, go here at that time. And it was really amazing. And I think what made it so special was that it was personalized specifically to us. And it also made us feel like we were there and almost a local instead of feeling like we were tourists.
Just to sidebar for a second, do you think AI now or in the future will have the ability to do exactly that?
Yes, and we're already seeing it. There's a couple of tools out there. One I like is called Mind Trip. You can go take a look at that. It's very similar in that you plug in a city with your interests and the AI tool will populate with things it thinks are a fit. Now, is it as good as that human front desk person who lived in Barcelona, who was part of the travel industry? Maybe not yet, but right. I do see it getting a lot closer.
Or maybe that empowers him one day to give recommendations and he says, oh, I know they mentioned this, so actually I'm going to take that out. Or, oh, I didn't think about that one. That's a good point. I should recommend that to them too.
Yeah, definitely.
So on the flip side of that, what was the worst hospitality experience you've ever had?
It was recent. It was in July. I got embroiled in the CrowdStrike disaster. I was trying to fly to GBTA in Atlanta and it felt like I just couldn't get there because every time I showed up at the airport, my flight was canceled or delayed and delayed and delayed until I think it was like 3 days later, I finally showed up for the event. That was rough going.
That is a really good point. Like, is there a risk, as I imagine there is with all technology, of like AI, quote, going down, like we saw with all the technology involved in the CrowdStrike event?
Mm-hmm. There's definitely risks. I mean, a great example, ChatGPT went down, or I should say OpenAI went down for 3 hours just this week. And there are all these websites now whose chatbots are powered by OpenAI. None of them worked because they're connected to OpenAI. So I think that's a definite risk, something you want to keep an eye on.
Interesting. And final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, could be a person, a brand, maybe even a chatbot, that you think has truly mastered it?
Hospitality to me means feeling welcomed, feeling like I'm a part of a place, and really experiencing what's there. Like the front desk clerk in Barcelona is a great example. He just embodied hospitality to me. And I think if there's a brand that does it most consistently for me is Marriott. And the reason for that is I'm a Marriott loyalist and they have a lot of options and I travel to a lot of different locations. And I've always found that The rooms suit me and my style of travel. The staff are always very pleasant and welcoming. And I think that's a brand that's managed to provide hospitality to me on a bigger scale.
Tahnee, thank you so much for being here today, for teaching me so much more about AI that I've ever known and getting me more excited to continue to dive in and use the tools.
Yeah, you're welcome. I love to talk about AI, and it's really fun when you get to have these kinds of conversations.
All right, everyone, it's time for today's sweet summary where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. My mind is still swirling from that chat with Tahnee. I think I'm equal parts excited and terrified about what AI can do now and what it's sure to be able to do in the not so distant future. One thing is clear, some work is about to be replaced by AI. As Tahnee said, if you work in a position with manual, repetitive tasks, you should be worried. But yet, at the same time, she was quick to point out that human connection still wins. We heard from Tahnee directly that she thinks the human element of hospitality is irreplaceable. Hotels will not be run by robots one day. But the rise of automation is a siren call for all of us to continue to adapt and evolve. So how do we do that? According to Tahnee, it's by starting to play around on and utilize the technology itself. Only through trial and error will we see how it can supercharge our lives and learn the things it's not good at, or not good at yet, anyway. As she said, if we're too afraid of the technology itself, there's going to come a point where we're left behind. And it doesn't have to be intimidating or scary. In fact, how can we use it to simplify the most mundane things in our lives? I loved Tahnee's example of having AI help her prepare for Thanksgiving. It planned her schedule, built her shopping list, accounted for dietary restrictions, suggested substitutions for ingredients she was missing. But it was still Tahnee who cooked the food. Still Tahnee who welcomed the guests and made them feel at home. It's clear that AI can be a powerful assistant, but it's still up to us to bring the heart. The future of hospitality and beyond will belong to those who balance both. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media at Sweet Success Podcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.